Hello, I'm Jackie, welcome back to my YouTube channel, and today we're going to be talking about the writer's journey. If you don't know me, my name is Jackie. I make writing and reading videos every Monday, and this is a follow-up to my video, The Hero with a Thousand Faces by Joseph Campbell. Now, to my great surprise, I actually really like this book. So I think if you're a writer and you're actually looking for outline help, I think this video can actually help you. Last one was mostly just me ranting. The Writer's Journey was published by Christopher Volger, a former consultant at Disney, in 1998. I have the second edition, which I have the third edition. That's awkward. I have the third edition, which includes a preface from the second edition that actually addresses a lot of the issues that I had with Joseph Campbell's A Hero with a Thousand Faces. To recap my last video, although I recommend checking it out, I spent a lot of time on it and I think it looks really cool. But The Hero with a Thousand Faces was essentially how do I put this? The Hero with a Thousand Faces was essentially a mythologist taking a whole bunch of world myths, putting them through a meat grinder of Freudian psychology, and coming out with a universal mythic formula. In contrast, The Writer's Journey is actually a very helpful writing guide. But yeah, this introduction is actually really good. It even addresses things that I didn't even pick up on when I was reading The Hero with a Thousand Faces. The first, which is the criticism that I have mostly heard, is that the hero's journey as a storytelling outline is formulaic. In fact, my experience with The Hero's Journey was me giving what I still stand by was very relevant feedback to someone else's manuscript, and they responded with, well, my story follows the hero's journey, so now your book still has problems that you should fix. Just because you follow the hero's journey does not mean that your book is infallible or that everybody's going to love it. It just means you followed the hero's journey. Can it be a helpful tool? Absolutely. It's not a crutch. And Christopher Volger says it should be used as a form, not a formula, a reference point and a source of inspiration, not a dictatorial mandate. Another issue that he addresses that I didn't think of was cultural imperialism. I will say, if your storytelling solution has been accused of cultural imperialism, that's a pretty serious criticism. And Christopher Volger agrees with this. He says, yes, the hero's journey, when I created it, was meant to be a simple, helpful storytelling tools for studios in Hollywood. I was not expecting it to go worldwide. And if you take international filmmakers and you tell them all to follow one formula, absolutely that is going to take traditional forms of storytelling and wipe them out, especially if you feel like you have to follow them in order to compete with massive American or Western studios. And he agrees that the hero's journey should not be a dictatorial mandate, and it should absolutely not be used as a tool of cultural imperialism to wipe out local, small studios. Everybody should have their own local flavor in their movies, or their books in this case. He does largely refer to scripts and script writing in this book, just because that is his personal background, and I know this is very popular with scriptwriters. Another criticism that I didn't even pick up on, the focus of the story being a hero who has to go fight things, i.e. kill things, promotes violence. And I'm like, yeah, I can see that now. I probably should have picked up on that in my video on The Hero with a Thousand Faces. But you can use the hero's journey for people who don't go kill things. You can, one of the movies that he references is Harrison Ford's Witness, where literally the message of the story is violence is not the answer. And it still follows the hero's journey. And then, of course, the criticism that made me furious. Is the hero's journey, as presented by Joseph Campbell, sexist? Yes. Yes, it is. And it just meant so much to me for him to be like, yeah, this is a super sexist theory. He clarifies that in his book, he actually, and he follows through, which I really appreciate, he does use he and she just about equally, makes it clear that women can be the heroes of their own stories. They are not a trophy at the end of the road, or an evil seductress trying to bring the hero off their path. They can actually do things. And I'm like, oh, thank God. And that's where I'm like, okay, I can like this book. This might actually be helpful. So now that we've got the introduction out of the way, let's go into what the actual hero's journey is. Stage 1, the ordinary world. This is establishing the ordinary, stable, unchanging world that your character inhabits before they go on their journey. It's in contrast to the unstable, unpredictable special world that we will enter later. Now, this is the part of the story where you're going to have your exposition, where you're going to essentially give the full backstory of what's happened to this character prior to them coming on screen or on page, and set up their strengths, weaknesses, who they are as a person, what they want, what they desire, all of that. And I appreciate the comment that that's really, really hard. In fact, I would argue, and Christopher I cannot say his name, Vogler? If you know how to say his name, tell me in the comments. But yes, he acknowledges that that's really hard, arguably the hardest thing to master when you're learning to write, and it's right up front, so there's no avoiding it. You can have a Harry the Explainer character who just pops up and it's just like, now that's Jim, he's never been the same since his wife left. Or you can have the narrator just tell the entire backstory if you want, that's also a bit blunt. But if you're a really good writer, you'll find a way to weave in all this necessary information to the plot. And a lot of that is depending on how you want to open your story. Preferably you want to do something that shows the character's personality or their wants or their needs and introduces the world in a way that will set up the story later on. Stage 2, the call to adventure. Now, I personally would call this the inciting incident, because that's just the language I like to use, but it also can get called the catalyst or the trigger, depending on just how you've been told. Basically, this is the thing that upsets the ordinary world. He likes to use the Wizard of Oz a lot. I'm going to use Mulan for this example. This is the declaration that her father has to go to war. She's living a perfectly nice, happy existence until the Huns invade. Stage 3, the refusal of the call. Now, there's a variety of different reasons that a hero might refuse their call to adventure. In Mulan, to use that again, it's because her father actively is like, nope, I'm doing this thing. And she's like, okay, I guess you're doing this thing, Dad. Also, it might be dangerous, you know, now most people are not particularly excited to jump into danger, but some heroes are, and he does point out that a lot of the Arthurian knights are just like, pick me, I want to die, I want to die. It also might be that the hero has multiple offers. They actually have to make a choice between one thing or another thing. There's often also threshold guardians. He uses the threshold guardians multiple times, and rather than being Freudian creations of your mind in order to not help you work through your psychological problems, these are actually people in the story who are like, hey, maybe don't do that thing, or hey, you can't come in here. Stage 4, meeting with the mentor. Now, Christopher Volger, I'm so sorry, dude. So Christopher Volger mentions multiple times the study of Russian folklore, and the Russian folklore, and often other types of folklore, you need things. You need to get ready for this journey. And who should step in and help you out with that but a mentor? Now, the mentor is often a hero who is advanced beyond their story. They're somebody who has gone on adventures, they know what it's like, and they're now experienced enough to turn around and help a young hero on their quest. They are an evolved hero. Now, their job is usually to propel the story forward, whether that's telling the hero when they're wavering back and forth about whether or not to go on their quest, to tell them to just go for it, get out of the house, or whether they actually provide them with helpful objects that will come along later in the story. Stage 5, crossing of the first threshold. Now, I don't really call it this, but I do have a sense of what they're talking about here. This is essentially the point where the hero decides to act. Now, the hero has no control over the inciting incident. Mulan has no effect whatsoever with the Huns invading China. However, she makes the decision to go to war. This is the point in the story where your hero is making the decision to act in response to the inciting incident. And it is quite important that they make that decision. There can be outside factors strongly influencing that decision, but they are the ones who actually take the initiative to do something. That is your crossing of the first threshold. Essentially, this stage is a leap of faith, and it might pay off, and it might not. Stage 6, tests, allies, and enemies. This is the entrance into the special world. The hero's journey is broken into 2 sections. The first 5 stages, you could say, take place in the ordinary world, and then you descend into the special world, and then you go back into the ordinary world. I'm sure you've seen it from this TEDx video on the subject of the hero's journey, which everybody has to watch in 9th grade, judging by the litany of comments from children who are angry that they have to watch it. But if you do want more knowledge about the hero's journey and its role in both old literature and new, I do recommend that video. I'll pin it up here. This stage of tests, allies, and enemies is pretty self-explanatory. You are tested, you get friends, you get enemies. If we're going with Mulan, and I swear I had no intention of using Mulan before I sat down here, but this is where she enters the military camp. She doesn't make any friends, but she's tested and she fails. Stage 7, approach to the innermost cave. So this is the build-up to a big event. And there's a lot of things that need to happen before the hero can have a showdown with a villain, or a minor villain if we're saving that to the end. You have to pack, you have to acquire potentially special objects that will help you on your quest. You've got to thin down the cast of characters to just the main people. And oftentimes you have to be tested repeatedly on the way to that big thing. If you're lucky, you get to devise a plan. Stage 8, the ordeal. So this is what I would call a midpoint turn. This is the part in the middle of the story where everything changes. You come out of it with extra knowledge, and all the things that happened before feel a little bit different. This is the symbolic death and rebirth of the character. In Mulan, once again, this would be the avalanche. Mulan nearly dies defeating the Huns, but she turns out to be fine, and now she is dead and reborn as a respected soldier. And this is also a very emotional time for the audience. They're very invested in these characters at this point. Hopefully, if they're not invested, you've not done your job. But they're very invested. There's a great sense of danger. They're really on the edge of their seat, and then everything is fine, and there's a great sense of elation and happiness. Stage 9, reward. Christopher Volger refers to this as the campfire scene. This is the part in the story where everybody's slowing down a little bit. We've had our super big, exciting midpoint adventure, and we're having a more character-fueled reflection on everything. At this point, the hero has what they want. He refers to this as the seizing of the sword, but based on his other descriptions, I think I'm gonna call this taking the MacGuffin. Because Alfred Hitchcock referred to the MacGuffin as essentially the object that everybody wants. So in the Marvel Universe, this is the Infinity Stones. In another movie that he references a lot is Romancing the Stone, and that is the super big emerald they're going after all the time. Romancing the Stone's actually a pretty good movie from what I remember, so check it out if you've got some 80s nostalgia. And this is where our hero has a moment of epiphany. They've realized something about the plot or themselves, but they have a moment of clarity where everything makes sense, and they know what they have to do. So in Mulan, once again, this is the part after the avalanche where Mulan is injured, and it's actually revealed that she has been a woman this whole time, and all of the characters react to that. And no one had to say that the reward was actually desirable. Stage 10, the road back. So this is the return into the ordinary world. But it's not going to be a pleasant return. A lot of times heroes return to the ordinary world because they are chased. They are actually on the run from somebody and they have to go back to where they started in order to fix it. Or remember that villain that we defeated during the ordeal? They're back and they're pissed. Once again in Mulan, this is the part where Shan Yu and all of the Huns hop out of the snow like daisies. This is also the break into Act 3, the moment where everything is building towards this big climax. Stage 11, Resurrection. This is the climax of the movie. The hero is given one final test, and this one is cumulative. They have to use all of the knowledge that they gain throughout the course of the journey and in the special world in order to return to the ordinary world and defeat the evil. In Mulan, this is her using her soldier training in addition to her lady training in the part where she's meeting the matchmaker to defeat the Huns. In the case of Mulan, I'm now realizing the stage of womanhood is the ordinary world and the stage of manhood is the special world. Didn't think about that before. This is also the logical conclusion of the character arc that has been building up the entire movie. He does have a very good chart in there, and I'll see if I can link it down below, about how a character's character arc should line up with each of the stages in the hero's journey. Stage 12, Return with the Elixir. This is also called the denouement. I would call it the resolution phase, and that is where everything gets tied up in either a bow if you're into that kind of thing, or just kind of resolving all the big plot points in a way that feels logical and leaving the ones that are open and are logical to stay open. It's also very important that you satisfy the audience in this stage. If you've got villains, you have to make sure that they've been punished properly, otherwise the audience is going to be really mad and have a sense of unresolution. And you also need to make sure that whoever needs to get the MacGuffin has the MacGuffin. This is obviously called the Return with the Elixir, and the Elixir offer is the MacGuffin, or it's just something else in order to help the people learn and grow and enjoy the benefits of that special world that the hero has brought back. Now, there's a whole lot more to this book than just the hero's journey section. He's got a really interesting discussion of different parts of being a writer. There's also a full chapter about needs versus wants and character development. He has his own take on the very famous Disney I Want song, because, you know, he was a Disney consultant, he knows their playbook. And I do think this is really good. If you're really interested in leveling up your craft and learning how to play with story in a way that the professionals do, great book. I also think it's a darn shame that this was harder to track down than Joseph Campbell's book, which was absolute crap and not helpful at all. So yeah, heartily recommend. I might return to this book in the future in order to do more explanations. I do think a video on needs and wants would be very interesting, so if you want that, go ahead and put that down in the comments. I know I'm far from the first YouTuber to do a discussion on that, but if you want my take, let me know. So that's it for today. If you like this content, subscribe to see more. I post writing and reading videos every Monday, and I'll see you next time. Bye!